TNKR Media.
Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs, showcasing stories from outstanding business people. It is one of Canada's longest-running podcasts and radio shows on business. In this new season, season number 16, is again presented by BDO Canada. My name is Dan Delmar of TNKR Media, along with my friend Michael Newton, who is the lead national corporate development at BDO Canada and our accountant emeritus on the program. Mike, nice to be with you again.
Great to be back, Dan. It's been a long summer, but it hasn't. There's just so much that's gone on, and for good or for bad, so much that just seems to keep perpetuating that I'm not sure we missed a beat in some of the topics.
We have a packed show today, and it's a great start to the season number 16 again, and we're going to put the pedal to the metal a little bit. So we're producing more content online. So it's a great idea to subscribe to the podcast on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, or your favorite platform. And we're always going to jam in a little bit more inspiring wisdom for you on our episodes. And the other goal, Mike, and we've discussed this a lot in the off season, whether or not we were going to continue after a decade and a half of the show. And one thing that we both want to do is help motivate people to accelerate Canadian entrepreneurship and to take bold risks. And really, we found a great Canadian entrepreneur who's doing that in the real estate space. So our first profile of the season is Mike Jager of Rosefellow, a Montreal-based real estate development firm. They're new and they're taking big risks and disrupting the industry with its kind of unique branding and their approach. When we got into the meeting with Mike, we saw right away on the Zoom call, he had a giant picture artwork of the Joker that said "not so serious," like this beautiful, ostentatious graffiti art. And he had a Ducati bike in his office. So he's a character, but definitely someone who is on the same page with our desire to accelerate things in Canadian business.
Yeah, you took the word right out of my mouth. Character is the word that comes to mind from Mike. I mean, he definitely is. He's dynamic. He takes up space in the room, and I think a lot of things that they're doing fits very nicely into what his character is, and his approach to dealing with things. And it was impressed to talk to the man. I mean, we have guests that are very knowledgeable. You have other guests that have this ability to kind of hone in and captivate an audience, and then you have some entrepreneurs who just exude entrepreneurship, who just exude the life and the passion that they're living, and Mike certainly fits that bill.
I'm glad we started with real estate this season, because if there's a sector that needs to be accelerated in Canada, it's real estate in general, especially on the residential side. We talk mostly commercial here, but he's certainly taking a lot of chances in the Montreal area and in Ontario as well, and big bets that are paying off. And dare I say, a way of going about business that's not typically Canadian.
Yeah, I think you used the word at the beginning, disruptor, which, I think that every industry, and whether that is, the world I live in, the accounting profession and the consulting profession, whether it's law profession, whether it's real estate, disruption is a good thing. Disruption is what keeps us thinking. Disruption is what keeps the creativity juices flowing. Disruption is to me, is almost part of every DNA of an entrepreneur today. And the real estate industry certainly is one in flux right now. The housing crisis in Canada, the cost of housing, the number of units, we're starting to see a little bit of movement in interest rates, but not significant enough yet, though they promise it's coming. I mean, the reality is, this is another one of those, base staples of life, right? I mean, it's what? Food, housing, we're talking about the two main staples of life, and finding a way to do things a little bit differently and disrupt is something. And, whether you agree with Mike or you don't disagree, whether you like the model or you don't, the fact that people are still going out there and doing things differently to try and get things moving along, I think is the benefit of society. Familiarity breeds contempt. At the end of the day, we do the same thing over and over and over again. We don't create, and in a world that is international, we can't afford to lose any more ground to some of our international competitors.
Agreed. Let's try to do our part on inspiring entrepreneurs, at least on the conversation front. And I think our longtime listeners are really going to appreciate Mike Jager from Rosefellow. And also later in the show, we have our debrief segment where we go a little bit more in depth with some technical solutions, this time for residential and commercial real estate. So Thomas Kontogianis, audit partner at BDO Canada, joins us to discuss interest rates and other developments in real estate that could have a major impact on how business is developed there. So that is on the way at the end of the show. We also have the one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs from our profile today as well. So that's how the show works, and we kick it all off with the current affairs chat, some news and notes, Mike. And one thing I wanted to bring to your attention, again, in terms of Canadian innovation, we do have a farming show lined up in the next few weeks. And so this one out of the dairy industry really surprised me. This is from the food professor at Dalhousie University online, Sylvain Charlevoix, and he reports the following. A shocking new study reveals over 6 billion liters of Canadian farm milk was wasted over the last decade, while food prices are still rising. And so this is dumping that's happening in order to protect the supply management system in Canada. And in total, according to the study estimate, Canadian dairy farms dump 7% of all milk they produce. Mike, supply management, it's very Canadian, but requires a second look, I think.
Well, Dan, if you're going to kick the show off, you might as well kick it off with something that's a little bit controversial at the end of the day. I mean, we can take this story in many different directions. I mean, obviously, looking at the basis behind the quotas, the price support, supporting the farming industry, I mean, there is a 110% validity to doing what we are doing. Our problem, I think, revolves around what has been the problem for many decades and is really coming to the forefront. It's not about the production. It's not about even the government intervention. It's all about the efficiency of the work that we're doing and the proper planning and the proper environment with which we're doing. I mean, bureaucracy has taken over. And, you know, dare I say that, do I believe, I mean, as you know, I grew up in the country. I grew up on a small farm. Had a lot of friends that were farmers in the South Shore and the Eastern Townships. And, you know, some of these quotas were basically the lifeline to supply in some bad years. So I totally get why they're in place. But, you know, it's like a lot of other things, which include some of our other social support networks. Very, very well thought out. Dare I say, poorly executed without finding myself in trouble. But I think a lot of this falls into the execution component.
And what about in terms of the Canadian economy in general? Obviously, it's been a really bumpy few weeks politically. I'm sensing some nervousness among Canadian business leaders. We perhaps didn't fall into a recession, but we came close, or certainly scraped that zone for a while here in Quebec. How are businesses reacting to the past few months, and what could be I suppose, a slower recovery than expected?
Confused. I really think that, there's a lot of confusion out there. I mean, we were told we were going to have a hard landing. Then we told, hey, if this works, we're going to have a soft landing. And, the latest article I read said we're having a landing. I think they've run out of terms. I think there's a lot of people feeling the pinch. I mean, there's no doubt that the cost of living is gone, through the roof between, as we talked about earlier, about, residential, real estate costs, living costs, food choices, food costs, people making decisions, not necessarily of the ones that they want to make, but the ones that they have to make, especially when it comes to food, which, plays a little bit into the whole discussion of quotas and the management choice that has to be made at the end of the day. I just find that the economy seems to be sitting in some kind of financial purgatory at the moment, without an inability to say, yes, we're going forward, this looks good, or no, we're crash landing. We seem to be in a hover position. And, what I'm seeing is, and I wasn't kidding when I said confused.
Certainly in marketing and PR, we do feel the bumps when it comes recession time. And I would say that there's a lot of half yeses that I'm getting, or people dipping their toes in, maybe not going as far or as elaborate with their launches or of their expenditures in the new year, but not holding back completely either. So I can sense that kind of confusion, middle ground, wait and see attitude. Yeah,
I fear, though, that the longer that goes on, the more we're going to be behind the eight ball when it comes to innovation, when it comes to strategy. Business doesn't hold well to wait and see, or the old, hurry up, now wait. And I think that that's what a lot of people are living right now. And there's a lot of questions in the marketplace with regards to, the government intervention, taxation, where we're going politically, Canada, the U.S. I mean, it just seems like every time you pick up, the paper, if you can get past, the terror and what's going on around the world. I mean, within our own borders, it's unbelievable the confusion that exists between the mix between the entrepreneurial, the government side, and the, shall we call it, the complacency elements of what has fallen into, and I'm going to say it again, is that whole discussion of compliance. We are not in down times or in sideways times. What do we look at? We look at compliance. When business goes forward, we start to move the compliance to the side in exchange for drive, innovation, risk taking. And we're kind of wallowing in compliance right now.
Mike, we've been doing the show for so long together that I remember asking both you and our former co-host Josh Miller back last time when we came close to a recession, which I think was 2012 here in Quebec. What does an entrepreneur do when they're in this kind of middle ground situation? And the advice you guys gave me was to double down on what you do best.
100%. I mean, there was an article a little while ago. Steve Jobs' his one line was, trust your intuition in decision making, and I think that this is lost on many businesses today. I think we're following scripts. I think we're strategic planning. I think we're doing all of those things. Dare I say, sometimes my profession is professing we should do. But we're missing out on those gut decision models that you've lived through and experienced and go through there. And part of that is a societal issue right now, as we still battle with, do we want to work from home? Do we want to come to office? Do we want to learn from other people? Do we know it all? Where does that stand? And in order to have those opportunities, dare I say, you have to make a mistake. You have to learn along the way, and then you learn from that. And I will say that in the majority of entrepreneurial successes come from that ability to make a gut decision, to trust an instinct, as opposed to follow the plan. Now, that doesn't mean that the plan doesn't have a place. It means that once you've trusted the intuition as to where you should be going, now you need the plan in place. But I'm not sure the plan replaces the gut feeling or the intuition that an entrepreneur needs to have.
Another super popular topic between us over the last few years is return to work, office versus hybrid versus remote. And this KPMG survey shows that the majority of CEOs see a full return to work within the next 3 years. At the same time, over the past few weeks, Mike, heading into the fall season here in Canada, a lot of federal government offices, a lot of public agencies have been moving from 2 in-person days to 3. So from a minority of days in person to a majority of days in person. Are you seeing a lot of that transition, people coming back to the offices in greater numbers?
Hesitant, yes. I mean, it's still a slog. I think the ability to try and get people to leave the comfort of what has become home, to displace themselves and sit in traffic and do all those things that we used to do that were considered part of the job, people have found that they no longer have to necessarily do in order to be successful. I think what you're seeing, and Dan, I think this is going to be pervasive over the next couple of years, is I think you're seeing upper management, I think you're seeing ownership starting to want to see people back in, from a mentoring, from a coaching, from an efficiency standpoint, bring them back to the office. We're going to continue to have a little bit of a hesitation coming from the workforce, because it does change a lifestyle that, pretty much for 5 years now, we've learned to, or most people have learned to accept. The interesting note in the survey, though, even though that, they're talking about an 87% return, if you break it down by category, it's quite interesting. So let's call it the aged group of CEOs, which they're calling the 60 to 69, 70 group. 87% predict a full return. Great. While 83% of those CEOs aged 50 to 59 are going to see a complete return. And lo and behold, once you get into the 40, 49, that millennial, you're down to 75% of CEOs. Partially because it's a philosophical difference, and partially because the people that fit into those categories, that's the way they came up, and that's the way they see it working, and that's the way they want to continue to see it working.
That's the case with us. I mean, we're in a unique position as a communications business to be virtual, but that happened way before the pandemic. I mean, we gave up our office 7-8 years ago now. So I don't see a reason to look back. Our model is becoming leaner and meaner, and that's what clients want. But if I'm a business advisor, for example, if I'm working in an environment, in a team environment that requires day-to-day collaboration, then I definitely, I definitely think in person has more value.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt you're preaching to the choir on that one. I mean, at 57, I fit into the late 60s category when it comes into that percentage number, maybe even into the 70s category. I'm in the office 5 days a week. I still wear a suit 4 out of 5 days a week. So, a little old-fashioned when it comes to that. But and you can't pay me to stay home to work. Why? Because I don't find that my headspace is in the same position. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's what you get used to. I used to joke. I had a skating rink in my backyard when on the farm when I grew up, and when we wanted to play around and have some fun, we went and skated in the rink out back. But when it was time to get serious, we went to the arena. So that's my home office versus coming to the office analogy for people. But the reality is you're still going to have a generational discussion on this going forward, and I still think, and I think, therefore I don't know. I think in 5 years, the longer this continues to go on in a hybrid environment, the longer we're going to have a harder time finding those leaders of the future that are going to have the people skills that we need to teach and lead going forward.
That I most certainly agree with. To lead, you have to be in person to lead, for sure.
Yeah, so don't tell me that an individual wants to be a leader but wants to work from home 5 days. Right there, I'm not even sure where to begin the conversation.
And that's why I find it so rewarding to advise Canadian leaders, whether it's remote or in person. It's because we are in urgent need of Canadian leadership, and we hope to focus on that on the program today and in the coming few weeks as well. And as I mentioned, Rosefellow, a really bold choice for our first entrepreneur group of the season. Yeah,
I think so. I think it's a good way to kick things off. It's energy, it's dynamic, it's a little out of the normal, and like you said, it's a bit of a disruption. And what better way to start a season with a little bit of disruption?
Our entrepreneur profile is Mike Jager from Rosefellow, and a conversation with him is up next on Inspiring Entrepreneurs, presented by BDO Canada. And don't forget, you can read more thought leadership and expert advice from the BDO team at bdo.ca. And let's get right to our guest. Mike Jager is the co-founder of the real estate development firm Rosefellow. Mike, welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much for having me.
The first question is the very easiest. What is Rosefellow?
So Rosefellow was actually founded in 2019 by myself and my business partner, Sam Tumas. Funny story. So Sam and I actually know each other for a long time. We were actually direct competitors. We hated each other. It was the worst of relationships. He was my direct competitor.
And what's the story about how you two came together?
So I was head of development at a company called Montoni with an office in Laval. I was there for about 10 years. And during my stint at Montoni, handling development, acquisitions, leasing, property management, I had a competitor that did the exact same thing as I did, and that was Sam Tumas at Broccolini. So as I was at Montoni, he was at Broccolini, and every big pitch in the city, that it'd be Amazon, ABB, Ericsson, we cross paths going in and out of boardrooms. So a client would invite us in, they invite them in, and I'd see him come out, and he would see me go in. I won some, he won some. And it was a bittersweet relationship, because whenever I'd lose a big pitch, I would lose it to Sam and his team. So at the onset, there was no friendship there. But as we grew, as we matured, you learn to understand that if you do lose a pitch or an opportunity, well, your adversary probably put in just as much time, if not a little more, to win that. And then, I text him, he texts me, hey, congrats. You won that mandate, and vice versa. We became very diplomatic, then became friends. We'd go out for dinners, put up the Chinese wall, not talk business. We invite our wives who are similar in age, our kids who are similar in age, and became really, really good friends. And I think over probably one too many glasses of wine, my wife said, hey, you guys are so different but so unique. Why don't you work together? We jokingly pushed it to the side. Fast forward a couple of years, and we said, you know what, that probably is the best thing. We literally started with no investors, no properties in hand, just with a dream to say, you know what, let's develop industrial and multi-residential properties in Montreal with the initiative to do one. One was what we wanted to accomplish in our first year of business. That was September 16, 2019. Fast forward a couple of months, COVID hits. we thought to ourselves, wow, we just made the biggest mistake of our lives. We're going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's because the world's coming to an end. Fortunately for us, we spent the 2 first months in business meeting every investor that we knew in Montreal, Toronto, and New York, just letting them know about our story. They would ask us the same question over and over again. Well, what are you guys here to do? Are you looking for money? Do you have a property to show us? We said, no. We just want to create a relationship. So when we do have a property, when we do have something to show you, just take our call. It was an easy ask. And every head of real estate, from BGO to Sun Life to Manulife, would give us their cell number saying, okay, call me when you have something. And that's what we did. We came across one property, a second property. COVID actually helped us in the sense that the demand for online sales grew. As we all lived, everybody was getting packages shipped to their door. No one was going shopping. So the demand for warehouse space blew up exponentially, which was great for us. The one thing that Rosefellow did and does differently from many others is we build on spec. What that means is we don't buy land, put up a sign for rent, and wait for a tenant to come knocking at our door. We, with our partners, will take a financial risk. We will develop what we consider to be the ideal industrial building for 80% of the market. And why I say 80% of the market? Because when you're building something that's not specific to one client, you're building for the general market of industrial users, which means good clear height, quality buildings. And we were betting that the resurgence of industrial demand would grow in Quebec, and it's exactly what happened. We then quickly, within our first 12 months in business, saw the appetite for industrial space. We said, we're going to open up our first real estate fund. Our lawyers and our consultants said we were crazy. They said, guys, your competitors, it's been 40, 50, 60 years before they opened up one fund. You guys think you're going to do so in a year? It's not going to happen. No one's going to believe in it. No one's going to invest in it. You're crazy. So we said, you know what, the hell with them. The same way we started Rosefellow and everybody said we were crazy to do so, we opened up our first fund. And when I say opened, we put together a list of 100 investors and said, okay, let's call them one by one, and hopefully we'll be able to put together $100 million. After 3 calls, gentlemen, we were able to put together our first $100 million fund, which gave us the opportunity to develop for $700 million in the province of Quebec, which was 9 properties. We were able to disperse that capital and do those projects within the first 12 months of business. We slowly thereafter opened up our second fund, which was for $125 million, which gave us the opportunity to develop for $625 million, but this time around we included Ontario as well. So within our first 5 years of business, today we have a little over 24 development projects in the province of Quebec and Ontario. We have 4 million square feet under construction, another 4 million coming in 2025. And we are now doing a revenue stream of about $3.2 billion. So that's the short story of Rosefellow in 5 years.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff to go with there, Mike. So I'm going to start slowly, take you back a little bit. I want to get back to the fund and the general situation with regards to real estate pre and post COVID. But you sparked something at the beginning with your partner, and it's something I've heard on many occasions. Is your wife said it. The two of you were so opposite that maybe you'll work really well together. This is something we see time and again from successful partnerships. Is one person's really good at something, one's good at the other. You're offsetting each other. How were the two of you different, and how did you, obviously, how did that work, and what were some of the obstacles, I guess, you had to address?
Mike, that's a great question. So we both did, like I mentioned, the exact same thing for direct competitors. So we were both good at sales. We were both good at putting leases together. But we quickly realized that we each had passions and we had our strengths. Sam is extremely good at the financial aspect of our business, the pro formas, putting the numbers together, understanding everything that has to do with financing, with the legal aspect of things. He's great at that. Compliments me. I'm more of a social bug. I'm more of the guy that's going to go out there and meet the investors, who's going to create the relationships, who's going to go meet the tenants, and solidify that bond we have in order to grow the business. So it was very, very different. We learned to respect what each other did. We didn't try to get into each other's feet. We didn't micromanage each other. He was good at what he did. I was good at what I did, and they complemented each other going forward.
Are your backgrounds different? I mean, I see you went to the same school my father did, the School of Hard Knocks, so I have a little bit of respect for that. Are the two of you similar in educational backgrounds in terms of, interests, or was this just like the meeting of two people that happened to be competitors?
Actually, so to what you said, Mike, unfortunately, no, I went to, following CEGEP, my dad got ill, and I went into his business, which is the family business. We were in textiles in Montreal. He kind of, when he came to Canada, he started, ground up, sweeping floors, became a manager, foreman, vice president, partner, and owned a textile company. I was born into that. I worked into that business. I saw him, the entrepreneur kind of blood was in me. And when he got sick when I was in CEGEP, I left school, went to help him out in the business with my sister. And that's where I got I guess I got it, the blood, sweat, and tears of running a business. Sam, no, on the other hand, went to university, got his education, and was really, really strong when I came to the financial aspect of things, where I was a little weaker. So we really knew, fed off our strengths and kind of complemented each other in that aspect of things.
Mike Jager joins us from Rosefellow. Mike, the co-CEO situation has always been something that Mike Newton and I have been very curious about. How does it work? How do you separate your workload? And how do you resolve disputes?
That's a great question. So Dan, one thing we always said we would do, and we've done so from the onset, if we can't agree on something, we're going to walk away. And what I mean by that is there could be a property that I love. I think it's the greatest asset in the West Island as an example. Sam may have a different feeling. So we have a simple rule. We'll call it going in the ring. For us, it means going to the board. And we'll close the door, we'll sit down, we'll look at the property, we'll each present our case as to why I think this is the best property for us, and he may say why it's probably the worst decision we can make. If we can't come to terms, either pass or go, we pass. It's as simple as that. And there's we promise each other that we will never come back on and said, I told you so. It's happened many, many times where we've gone, we've made the decision, and I got to tell you, to this day, we look back, we said that was the best decision. That I chose, that he chose, no matter who chose, that's the decision we make, that we will not fight over a property. If we can't come to terms in one meeting in the boardroom, we walk away, we don't talk about it again, we move on.
The interesting element of all of this is, COVID it's changed the world and the way we saw things. You alluded to a little bit at the beginning, and I think after the break we'll come back and delve a little bit deeper. But, what were the one or two main things that when you guys started in September 2019 to, March 2020, what were the pivots? What were the major areas that you guys went, this is what we started with, and went, oh man, we got to completely unravel it?
Mike, I love the question. I love the word you use, pivot. It's actually just what I wrote down as you were asking the question. We learned to be extremely agile. We learned to be able to pivot, as you mentioned, and I'll give you the best example. When we started Rosefellow, as I mentioned, we went to meet all these investors, these big institutions in New York and Toronto, who agreed to move forward with us as partners. When COVID hit, the response was heard over and over again. Gentlemen, Mike, Sam, I'm sorry, we're putting pen to table. We have to hit the brakes. We're not sure what's happening. We can't invest. You get a bit of a heart attack when you hear that, because you went down this path for 2-3 months with a potential partner, investor, big institution to be able to move forward, and then they tell you that. Well, what we quickly did is we pivoted, and when we pivoted to family offices. There's a lot of family offices in Montreal that looked at us and said, guys, we believe in this idea you have, and the fact that institutions are not in, we're ready to commit. We believe in it. We believe COVID will change, and with the family office, there was no red tape. So you didn't need a month or 2 months of approval process with some of the institutions. These ladies and gentlemen were saying, we're good. How much do we need? What's the next property? Go. And some of these family offices that are with us during COVID are still with us today. That's one thing about us. We stay very loyal. That'd be to our professionals, engineers, architects, whoever it may be, down to our investors. If there's opportunities that come up, we remember our grassroots, where we come from, and we stick by them. To the extent that there's a couple investors today that we reached out to, says, we just acquired a property, we already have a tenant in hand, would you like to come in on the deal? And the investor looks at us and she said, well, why are you bringing me into the deal? You bought the property, you have the tenant, you don't need me. The answer is simple. It's a thank you. It's a thank you for believing us when no one else did. In a time where there were so many uncertainties, and you committed with us, it's our payback to you. Say, come in, take 25, 50%. The deal's baked, but we want you to be part of our project. You earn that.
And Mike, I want to talk about politics only very briefly, and with regards to, it doesn't really matter what administration I think is in Montreal. I think a lot of people in real estate have a long list of grievances and have for many years. You have explored off-island as well lately, so I see you doing a little bit in Montreal and a little bit elsewhere. How is dealing with the city of Montreal versus surrounding municipalities?
I got to tell you, every city has their pros and cons. Some have been extremely easy to work with. Others have been difficult to the extent where that even if they would give us land for free, we will not develop in those cities, just because there's such red tape. And you compare that, and it's incredible because we're on the island, and we could be a couple of kilometers away from one from the other, and the borrowers have a complete different mindset. Some are pro-business. We want to see a project. What do we got to do to make it happen? Where others are like, well, no, we're going to have to sit down. We expect this and that. And I'll give you the best example. We presented a project to a city where we were demolishing an old warehouse, an old factory. And we came to the city and said, here's an idea we have. We want to get your thoughts. Because one thing we do, we'll never push plans upon a city. We're always going to kind of say, how do we make this a win-win for the city and for us as a developer? Well, this city, 3 pages into our PowerPoint, said, stop, we have a presentation to show you. And we were excited. So, wow, it's the first time the city has a presentation for us to see how they want to develop our site. And then they pulled out their package, and we looked at the screen, and there was an industrial building, and then there's townhouses that were erected on that, and then condominiums above that. And we said, what is this? Oh, these are projects we've seen in Tokyo and Sweden, and we think it would be good to do a vertically mixed-use project. And we were flabbergasted. We said, well, gentlemen, what happens when the truck backs up at 6 a.m. and you're sitting in your balcony having a coffee? Is that what you want to hear? Is the truck backing up? Well, okay, maybe that's not the best idea. And then they talked about a microbrewery, and they talked about putting a daycare and maybe a community gym on the roof. And we asked the question, well, who's going to pay for all this? Well, you're developers, you're rich. That was the response we got. So that gives you an idea how extreme some people have a vision for projects. And I got to tell you, it ended up being one of the best cities to work with, because finally we went back and forth explaining to them how it's not just a gimme. And we do have probably one of the most beautiful projects we're going to be developing in that city. And it came down to a standard carbon zero LEED certified industrial building. But that's where the idea started, and that's where it ended up. Other cities, we were able to get a construction permit within 4 months from delivering plans. Others, it's 18 months, and I'm still waiting. It really, really goes from one end to the other. Ontario is I'd say a slower permitting process timeline, because there's a site plan approval process which sometimes takes 12, 18, 24 months, which we don't have in Quebec. And if you compare that to the States, we're opening an office in Miami very soon, where we're going to be developing across the United States. It's the same industrial building setup that we're doing here, spec buildings. And the term pro-business, you can tell it's pro-business. Every state we've spoken to, and there's not every, I should say, sorry, there's 12 states we've been speaking to with interest to develop. They've been very welcoming. That, not just the fact that we're Canadian, they're welcoming to say, we want to see a project. What do we got to do? How much land you need? How quick do you need the permits, the plans to be approved? It's very, very pro-business, which is nice to hear. And we do have the same philosophy here with some cities, but not all, unfortunately.
It's very interesting, Mike, because I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking, well, I could translate that to business as well, away from the real estate industry and the government sector, but as well into the private corporate sector, where you have some leaders and CEOs whose mindset is open, is looking. Yeah, they have a preconceived notion of what they want, but are open enough to be swayed if the project makes sense. You have others that stick to bureaucracy and stick to compliance, and it makes business very, very difficult. So there's as much as we like to think that the government government is very different. I think there's a lot of similarities, certainly in that environment. I just wanted to pivot a little bit in this conversation. The real estate sector is one that is in the news every day. Post-COVID, it has been the Chicken Little sky is falling to it's great to commercial is dying in the cities, industrial is building. Give us your opinion in terms of where you see the market right now and where you see it potentially going over the next little while.
So if I look at two asset classes, residential and industrial, I think there's a huge demand for flight to quality when it comes to industrial space. We have a very mature industrial asset in Montreal. A lot of buildings that were built in the 70s and 80s. There wasn't that much new product being delivered. We only build new 40-foot clear industrial class A spec building, LEED certified, carbon zero certified. A lot of these multinationals look for that. They are coming back, which is great. They're coming back to Quebec. They look for opportunities here. We heard it for many, many years. Oh, no, the big retailers, the big, industrial users only look for space in Toronto. That's not true. We just did Nespresso Canada's first distribution center in Canada was done here in Quebec. That's incredible. They chose our province over Ontario and over others. So there's a flight to quality. Vacancy rates for Class A industrial space is extremely low. Everybody says, vacancy rate's 5% for industrial space. Well, if you dissect that 5% and look at what's Class A industrial, it's probably about 0.6, 0.7%. Hence why we still build. When it comes to the multi-residential side of things, we built a few buildings. We have about 500 units in our portfolio. What I see is to be an impediment is we keep hearing there's a lack of residential units available for so many people. The problem is you need assistance. Today's land cost, construction cost, financing cost, if you factor all those together, you're not able to rent a unit at $1.10, $1.20 a foot. Our cost, one of our buildings, we're renting at $2.25, which we don't think to be aggressive. It's kind of in the middle spot, but it's still more expensive than more people can afford. So there has to be some type of ways the government can assist, and maybe it's a tax relief. There's got to be something, because we just can't make the numbers work in order to do low-income housing with the cost of construction, the cost of land today.
Mike Jager joins us from the developer Rosefellow. They develop industrial properties all around the Montreal area and increasingly in the States too.
So you touched, Mike, on a couple of things in terms of, I guess, the hot market topics and the sustainability leads. Maybe discuss a little bit how this factors into how you guys do work, how you guys are pitching for subs as you're working. What does this mean to the market? I think for a lot of people listening, it's a little bit out there in terms of concept.
Absolutely. So there's two certifications we look for in every building that we build. One is LEED. So that's basically the world's most widely used green building rating system, which provides a certain framework for healthy and highly efficient green buildings. And carbon zero is more of how you offset your carbon emissions. It's important for us, one, for the next generation, right? I have kids. I want to try to do something right for them. And two, the ESG initiatives by most companies today is to have a good quality environment for their people, for their staff. So they look for these types of certification in buildings, which you can't get in older product. So it's important to us. Even financial institutions look at this now, and they'll give us a bit of a better rate when we go for financing on these buildings, because they're green, we'll call them green buildings, because they have their own ESG initiatives. And you think down the line in 10, 15 years, should we put some of these buildings on the market for sale? Well, a lot of these big institutions will not have a choice but to buy green buildings, because they're going to have their own ESG initiatives to do so. So it's a win-win. It's a win-win for the tenants. It's a win-win for the environment. It's a win-win for us as developers when it comes to financing, when it comes to one day selling the property. Overall, it's just a good initiative to take on.
So from an older building perspective, how easy is it to convert into a LEEDs approved type environment, or are these buildings going to find themselves, isolated?
I would say it's more of an isolated factor. There's always going to be businesses, people, and companies that are going to look for the kind of lowest possible rate. That don't really care for the height in industrial building. They could be in manufacturing production, and they're okay with it as long as it's the absolute best rate they can get. Obviously, a Class A building, a certified building in the nature that we do, are going to come at a bit of a premium. But overall, what happens is many of these big Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, they look at how they can maximize cubic sizes in a building. So how you can stack the pallets and put them as high as you can. It's not just about square footage no more. So they're reducing their footprint, and they're going vertically. And we've just seen that happen with one of our clients here in the West Island, Polar Pack. Polar Pack just leased a 260,000 square foot space in Kirkland, where they were consolidating 3 buildings into one. And one of their number one criteria was, how do I create a better environment for my staff? And 2 is, how do I maximize area within a warehouse? When I say area, it's cubic space and not only square footage.
Micah, you've risen fairly quickly, Rosefellow, in the past few years. Marketing has something to do with that, I'm sure. Tell me about the sort of the hype machine and what you've been doing right in terms of marketing. I see you have a podcast going, which is kind of how you came on my radar. What advice would you have for those who are trying to raise awareness very quickly?
Dan, Mike, I love what you guys are doing, and we try to do the same thing and mimic what you do, actually, because we believe it's important to get out there. The reason we put such an emphasis on marketing and branding when we started Rosefellow, day one, we were creating these videos. We had no properties. We had no land. But what we did notice is people, and I'll speak for our industry in real estate, especially in industrial real estate, it was a very archaic way of thinking, in the sense that you would know about a company, you didn't know about the people behind the company. And it was so important for Sam and I to let everyone know who the owners of Rosefellow were. Because if you like the people behind the brand, you hopefully want to do business with the brand. So we doubled down from day one on marketing, on branding, with podcasts, with videos, just to get people familiar about the people behind the company. We've grown from 2. We're today 18, and I truly, genuinely believe I have 18 of the best people in the industry, from analysts to our attorneys. And they're people who they love the environment. For us, it's about the culture within the company. You can be the best project manager in the world. If you don't click with our team, you're not going to work at Rosefellow. It's as simple as that.
So let's dig into the office a little bit, Mike. When you came on camera right away, we were really impressed by the artwork you had there. You have a graffiti art portrait of the Joker where it says, "Why so serious?" So obviously some levity in the background there. You've got a full-on bike in your office. Is that a Ducati?
It is a Ducati.
That's incredible. So there's a lot of your personality around the office, around the branding. Is that a good idea, do you think, for entrepreneurs to inject more of themselves into their brands?
I will give you the best example, Dan. When one of the first calls we had when we started Rosefellow was with a big pension fund institution, out of Ontario, and the team comes on the Zoom call. Sorry, it was a Zoom call. Unfortunately, during COVID, we're on lockdown, and he was in a shirt, in his tie, and Sam and I came on the call. I was in a T-shirt. Sam had a cap on, a Rosefellow cap, and he looked at us and said, "Guys, did you forget we had a call? Did you forget to dress up?" We said, and we said, "Mike, no, we didn't. But listen, what you see is what you get. What we promise you is our word is golden. When we will deliver on any promise we do give you." Fast forward 3 calls, 2 months later, we had these calls every Friday morning. The Zoom opens up. Mike is in a polo shirt. He's got a Coors Light at the corner of his table. He's got a cap on, and he's like, I love working with you guys because excuse the term, it's no bullshit. It's straight to the point. You're not hiding behind a suit. And let me tell you, I worked in a 3-piece suit for 10 years in my previous life. Sam did as well. We just want ourselves, our partners, and our team to feel comfortable. It's not by putting on a tie that you're going to be any more professional than the guy next to you that's in a pair of jeans. So it's important for us to create a culture that is, you are who you are, and if you want to come in a pair of shorts and a pair of running shoes, that's fine. Obviously, we adapt accordingly. If we're going to have a big meeting in New York and there's 12 people around a table in suits and ties, well, we're going to put on a suit and tie. But it's not about that. That doesn't make us. And I think that was important for us. And the message we relate to our team, we just want you to do what you need to do. There's no hours. You can come in when you need to come in, go when you need to go. But you have a job to do. You have a project to handle. handle like it's your own baby. If it means you're spending 12 hours running the project, but on a Friday, you want to take a long weekend off and go to Vegas with your wife, well, you do that. As long as you're responsible for what you need to do. I'm not here to micromanage. I'm not here to baby you. I trust the people I have, and I consider them each bosses of their own projects.
A word about habits now for entrepreneurs. And in researching you and the company, I had a note here that apparently you have a very intense workout regime. So I'm curious about that and about how sort of good habits and a good routine can help fuel an entrepreneur.
I firmly believe that it's so important to take care of yourself. Health is key. I have a routine. I get up at 4:30 every morning. I go to the gym. It's I put on my headset and I kind of clear myself and prepare myself for my day. I journal every night what I need to do for the following day. I think it's important to have a certain routine in order to have structure in your life. You got to have in any business, right? In my opinion, you need grit, you need perseverance. We went over situation where we had to pivot. We could have given up and thrown in the towel. We said no. And if I can give a word of advice for anybody who's thinking about starting a business, it's think of the absolute worst thing that can happen. And I did that. What's the worst thing that can happen if you don't succeed? And in my case, when we started Rosefellow, Sam and I put every last dollar we had in the business. We mortgaged our homes. Every dollar we had in our bank account, we put into the business. And my wife, who's very structured financially, nurse, said, well, what happens if we're going to lose everything? Well, we took that risk 10 years ago when I went into real estate and I left my dad's company. I put every last dollar into the idea of going into real estate. Well, we sold our house. I sold my big truck. I sold my motorcycle, and we moved into the 1.5 of the triplex of my in-laws. That for me was the bottom low. Couldn't pay rent, which was $400 because I wasn't making any money. So I thought to myself, by opening Rosefellow, what's the worst thing that can happen if it doesn't succeed? I'll be back in a 1.5 with 2 kids. It'll be a little tight, but you know what? We had food in our mouth. We were able to survive, and we'll do it again. And I told her, just like I told myself, if it doesn't succeed, we're going to keep trying till it does. Because I believe being an entrepreneur is the most amazing opportunity we have. You can be the boss of your own world, but not to think that means you're in control of your calendar and you have more time for yourself. A lot of people think going into business, you have all this time, you can do what you want when you want. That's the absolute opposite. When you run a business, you have no more time. There is no simple balance. There is no 50-50 home life, work life. I'll spend sometimes 15 hours at the office. I spent the night here, sleeping here, just because I had to. So that doesn't exist today. Maybe one day there'll be a balance. But I got to say, you got to have grit, you got to have perseverance. And if you're starting a business, think of the absolute worst thing that can happen. And if you can survive that and you're okay with that, then go forward with it.
Mike, it's very interesting listening to you and answering Dan's questions and the convergence of what is really in many people's minds two different people or two different thought processes. And I don't mean you and your partner, I mean Mike and Mike. And the Joker, the Ducati bike, the way you talk and deal, very open, very, all kind of a little bit of all over the place because you're a high energy kind of guy, yet highly disciplined and highly structured in what you're doing. And I find that this is something that gets lost today, and particularly on either young entrepreneurs or young people coming into the market where they want to be unique and different, where they want to, but they don't bring with it the other element which complements that personality in order for them to create the environment that you're talking about. And I think from a leader, that in and of itself creates a culture for your people to see, hey, here's a guy who's probably all over the place. I mean, you and I will get along great because we're both high energy, high octane, and I don't know about you, but my attention span can be a little limited at times. But it's also something that you're showing your people that you have a discipline, you have an approach, you have a focus, you have a commitment. And I think that melding or that convergence of those two is something that we're missing today in a lot of people.
I tend to agree, Mike. But what's amazing, it resonates with others. You don't have to tell someone, be here in the morning, work hard, do what you got to do. If you do it and you believe in it and you're here early in the morning, others will follow. I left the other night. It was about 7:30 at night. There was there was 4 of my I'll call them colleagues, I call them employees, team members that were still in the office in our construction division, brainstorming over a project. They were laughing, they're having a good time. It's incredible to see. It's not. Keep telling people, if you consider this to be a job, this is not for you. Love what you do, be passionate about it, and it'll just be a fun, dynamic place to work. And that's what's great about here. Everybody smiles, everybody laughs. It's not serious, but at the same time, it's all business. So to your point, Mike, it's kind of one end and the other, where we know what we have to do. We have a goal, we have a mission, but have fun doing it. We don't work in silos. That's one thing that I think people appreciate within our company. There's no silos within our company. From the receptionist to myself and my partner Sam, we sit down and we talk about every project together, because everybody's opinion matters. And it's come up where we've had a discussion, and one of the assistants here of our construction team said, "Hey, I know of a project close by, and I think we should do this or that to the building. What do you think?" We value that. We value that. We don't keep cards close to our chest. It's an open book kind of mindset at Rosefellow, and people appreciate that.
Leadership to me is always about, what you're doing with your team and how you're leading. It's not about necessarily what you say. Actually, in most cases, it's not about what you say. It's what you follow up with what you say, and how you're leading by example. And, you watch a lot of leadership environments where, somebody thinks because they can stand up and pontificate that they're leading. I'm not going to bring politics into this at all. But, realistically speaking, how many people stand up and pontificate and then don't turn around and, get in the trenches with the team and do what has to be done, or live the discipline that you want from everybody else, but you're not going to be disciplined yourself. And I think that is, I know this is not going to be on the radio. This is on the podcast element here, but this is something to me that is huge. This is something that we are lacking in today's world. If I hear, and everybody around me knows, if I hear the work-life balance question one more time or statement one more time, I may end up in jail, and the reality is, because to me it's an excuse. If you like what you're doing, if you're committed to what you're doing, then the balance finds itself in that exercise. And leadership is not about me sitting there telling you what work-life balance is. And I find the philosophical approach that you're bringing to this, very, very refreshing, and certainly something that needs to find its way to more people's ears at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. You know what? The work-life balance is a great term to use. I also believe if you're passionate about what you do, it's not work. So there's no real balance, because it's not work. But you know what? I think you do need to lead by example. I was born in a household where my dad worked hard to the extent where, I'll give you the best example. When I was 12 years old, I got a birthday card from my father. My father would never give me cards. That was my mom's, we'll call it her job. That's what my dad couldn't consider her job to take care of the cards and go buy the gifts. But he gave me a card for my birthday, and I was, wow, from a man who never told me he loved me, or it was really, about affection. He gave me a card, and I said, wow, what's this? And I opened it up, and I see like a little card, look like a credit card. I said, what's this, Dad? He goes, that's your social insurance card. He goes, now you can come to work. Basically, as at the age of 12, every day off, every summer, I would not be going to play tennis or go swimming. I had to go to work. But it instilled a work ethic in me like no other. I hated him back then for it. I love him today. And I can't say I'm doing the same for my kids. I'm not as tough as my dad is, and maybe it does make them soft. But I gotta say, my kids see how hard I work, and I know the message has resonated.
One quick point. I know we gotta wrap up, but one quick point. When I listen to you, Mike, talk about that in terms of what that effect is on the next generation, I think we're all guilty of some of that. The old philosophy is you want your kids to be better off than you were, and our definition of what that better off is not always the same. And I think as we look at the world around us now, when we look at the price of things and inflation, the question comes back to us: are our kids going to be better off than us? And I think you and I could have an entire show on this topic. So we'll wrap it up with that thought process, but I do think it's food for thought for a lot of people.
Appreciate that, Mike.
Mike Jager, co-founder, co-CEO of the real estate development firm Rosefellow. His one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs is on the way. But first, let's check in with our BDO specialist. Thomas Kontogianis is an audit partner at BDO Canada. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
And Mike, there's a million and one little details to pay attention to when you're in the real estate business.
The real estate industry is something that is highly specialized, and funny enough, it's one of those few industries that is so specialized but touches all of us, and at the end of the day. So, Thomas, as we look at going forward, I mean, the biggest topic, I guess, right now in real estate, other than coming back to work as a staffing perspective, is interest rates. Interest rates are all over the map. I mean, we've had cuts in the U.S., we've had some cuts in Canada. We keep hearing, that we're going to get more cuts. We also heard that last year, and it was deferred out a period. One of the biggest issues I think that's affecting Canadians and Americans, at this point is housing crisis and the costs. Do you think that the decrease in interest rates will actually be a solution to the housing crisis?
So I think it's a great question. I think there's a lot of anticipation about what this cut in interest rates will do for the market affordability and this housing crisis altogether. The big issue with the housing crisis right now is supply, and a lot of the reason of the slow start to supply is the cost of construction. And for a developer looking to put out a project, they're not going to develop new housing until there's some profit to be made, which makes logical sense. But at the end of the day, the interest component can help bring back a level of profitability to projects, and we've already started to see a little bit more starts. But the interest component isn't the only factor. There's been a lot of factors over the past few years that have contributed to just development of new projects being very costly. So if you think of a few other issues other than high interest rates, are skilled labor. So skilled labor has been an issue. So the cost of finding and attracting skilled labor to get the construction done, and also the cost of construction supplies has really gone up significantly. So although the decrease in interest rates is a step in the right direction, there will be other factors such as being able to find, attract, and really bring in skilled labor force into the construction market, and trying to find ways to bring down the cost of construction materials.
It's amazing to listen to the rhetoric in the U.S. right now going on about, the housing crisis and, blaming immigration and so many things. I mean, there's this part of this element that is overall just the grand number of people, inflation rates, and the points that you're talking about. And I think we need to go back to basics as we learn to address the housing crisis. Let's go from housing crisis to getting people back into the office, my favorite topic. There was a recent survey done by one of the big four accounting firms as they interviewed CEOs, of which they said in 6 months, 83% of the firms, of CEOs, actually decided that we are going to start seeing people come back to the office, and they seem between 3 and 5 years they're going to be coming back. How's this going to affect real estate?
So I think it's important to consider a number of factors. I think remote work to a certain extent is here to stay. And I think we need to rethink of what an office environment looks like on the day-to-day, and how do commercial real estate holders and how do employers decide to take on new space or redesign space for this new reality. I think the traditional office space where everyone has their own desk and sits there 5 days a week, I think that time is behind us. And I think as employers look to attract and build culture in this new environment, they have to relook at how they're looking at their office space. So the office is becoming more of an area to meet, collaborate, build culture, rather than just to get the job done, because a lot of people could easily get the job done from home, and it's been proven through the COVID era, right? So I think as employers look to attract and retain talent and really build into a new culture, I think it's really important of how they look into designing their space. If we take that a level up in terms of the property holders and the how do commercial real estate holders now redesign their space to attract companies, they have to be bearing this in mind as well. Although there may be reduced space or the same space, but the way of redesigning the workspace with this new work reality in mind is going to be really important in remaining competitive in the space and attracting top tier tenants.
Thomas, this is where you look at me and I look at you, and we realize there's a generation gap of one generation between us. And the good news for you is I'm closer to retirement than you are, because we would disagree on bringing people back and what the workspace is for. But hey, that's what creates a market at the end of the day. And I guess the last point, really before we let you go is, retail real estate has shown some resilience and even despite some even some growth despite online shopping. Talk to us a little bit about why.
So I think there was this really big doomsday coming about when online retail started to pick up, and most people were doing a lot of shopping online about what this meant for retail stores, retail real estate in general. And I think there's been a really good pivot for a lot of retailers as to not just kind of changing the page and seeing how a retail space could complement and build a further relationship with the customer, rather than just being a place where you go to buy an item. So being able to go into a store and try on the item, but having the experience, the culture behind it. If you look at places like a Lululemon, like these places where you really go in and you feel an experience, you dive into the culture, and it kind of complements what you do on the online shopping. So it's not as much about driving sales, but about driving a relationship with the customer. So I think a lot of successful retailers have noticed this, and the customer really buys into it and helps build the brand. So I think that's where we've seen, despite the big increase in online shopping, the retail component still remain an important part of a relationship build with the customer.
Thomas Kontogianis, audit partner at BDO Canada. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Have a great day, guys.
And as we come to the end of our show, we turn to our entrepreneur, Mike Jager of Rosefellow, co-founder, co-CEO, and ask him for his one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneur. Please, Mike.
If you have a dream, don't give up. It sounds corny, but it's true. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. From the time I was a kid, I saw my dad own his business and what it took. It's something I wanted to do. And even though I was working for a developer for 10 years, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to own my own company, wanted to do my own thing. Not because I thought I could do it better, just because I thought I could do it my way. And if you do have a dream and you're passionate about it, just follow it and think of the worst thing that can happen. I keep saying that because it's not that bad. And if you fail, get back up and do it again. Just don't give up, because my biggest fear in life is to grow old, to be 75, 80 years old, to look back and say, I should have done this or I should have done that. And hence, Mike, that's why I do have a Ducati in my office, and that's why I'm a little off the wagon sometimes when it comes to crazy things like cars and whatnot, just because I always said to myself, I never want to grow old and have regrets of anything I've done in my life. And you know what? I'm very proud to say that Rosefellow has become successful. It's a dream of mine to have started this, and I'm happy that we are where we are today.
Mike, excellent chat. Thanks so much for joining us on the season premiere.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And Mike Newton, next week we have another Montreal-based innovator who's spreading across the country. Pizza number 900. That's coming up next on Inspiring Entrepreneurs. A reminder, you can subscribe to the podcast on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, or your favorite platform. And we'll see you next week.
Think Big. TNKR Media. Good talk.